Okay, so it's a kind of a mouthful, but I kind of bolded the two words that meant the most to me in this title: practical methods for software engineering idealism. So what brought this up is, we come to these events year after year, and we hear about these great engineering principles, new design patterns, but mostly like how to improve our code, our lives, and our processes. And you all know who I am. It's that floating head there. And as Sarah said, most of these things are to improve our quality of lives as developers. So I want to talk. It's not just about the people. Some of this stuff is about processes or code, but this really is in line with our optimization and performance theme. So improving us as developers, our productivity, our quality, and our experience provides ongoing benefits beyond just the project that we're working on. So we hear about these engineering principles every year, and we're like, oh man, I can totally see the value in that, right? That's our understanding phase. And then I'm like, I want to go implement that. And, but after I'm done delivering this project, or which one am I going to do first, right? Because I came back from the summit, I've got 3 or 4 new things that I want to adopt and get benefit from, so that I can profit, hopefully. But it's not easy, right? There's plenty of other things going on. So my hypothesis is that most of us are good at implementing a few of these ideals, right? So I know I came back from my first summit, I had a whole pages of stuff that I'm like, wow, I want to do this, I want to do this. And a few things I did okay with, right? A few things I did really good. Some things I'm still trying to figure out. Most of the things, I'll be honest, I cracked at. Yeah. And I imagine my hypothesis is that it's like that for most of us here, right? We picked something that gave us the most value at the time, and that is different for each one of us. So my other part of the hypothesis is that those of us who have had challenges in implementing some of these principles, they're probably common issues, right? So if we can identify what those issues are, and then this is going to be a group discussion, we can identify what those issues are, and then there's some people that actually overcame those, and get them to tell us some practical advice, then we can all, I can all learn from you guys. We can all benefit from each other, but this is partially selfish as well. So we're going to discuss it. We're going to document it right here in the slide deck, and then we're going to distribute it. We're going to share it with everybody. Okay, so I picked some topics. We can go off track if we want, but some of the things that you hear about that I know not everybody has implemented is software testing, code reuse, continuous improvement, continuous integration or continuous delivery, distribution of software, and making our own dev tools to help us as developers. So, everybody's got the mics? All right, so what do you got? So which of these things is most painful, or which of these things will give you the most value that you're having a hard time getting traction with? Everybody just yell out, and this is a voting process.
So one of my major problem is there is software that could be used across many different programs and or projects, but the program doesn't want to pay for all the framework development or overall useful library development. They just only want to pay for what they perceive as their part.
Okay,
they're not talking together.
So let me interrupt you so I can get to the slides where we actually document this. So code reuse is what he wants to talk to.
Yeah, I'd say one of the things that can improve, or at least that I've witnessed, is the dev tools. Coming up with your own starting point templates, no blank block diagrams.
Okay, we have a vote for dev tools. This shouldn't be that, this should be simpler and faster.
Distribution.
Distribution. Software testing, we got one for each now.
I second software distribution.
Software distribution. Okay, we're gonna do that one first. All right, we're talking about software packaging, version control, and the mechanism to distribute your code. And if anybody's tried to do this, it gets out of hand really fast, right? So, I love this picture. It's like my house. All right, so what makes this hard, right? I know some of you guys have gotten really good at this. Some of us are ignorant about it, and some of us have tried and just can't seem to get traction with it. So it's microphone time.
Well, I think part of the problem is there's lots of different ways to distribute stuff. You could do, so if you're distributing, you could distribute XE, or you could distribute a bunch of XE with a bunch of PPLs. You distribute use code, you can use BFDN, PPM, and IPM. Right? There's just a lot of options, and it's always hard to decide what one is the best and the easiest. So.
All right. So I got deciding on a distribution channel and mechanism.
Having to plan for and try to be aware of all the different ways people might try to install and use your software. I mean, software testing kind of gets out of control.
Okay, end user, understanding end user use cases?
Yeah.
Is that, okay. Doesn't feel right, but all right. Now,
Convincing your customer that this is a thing they actually need to invest in as a first-class entity.
all right, because, you know, when you first explain it, it sounds like it's really good for you, right?
Right.
But actually, it's really good for them.
We'll figure that out when we get there. And yeah.
Along those lines, one of the things that I've talked before on technical wealth, on building technical wealth, is that as architects, we tend to leave the decision of how we're going to be distributing until too late. Where I say that that's something that needs to figure from day one. So if you are deploying very early iterations of your software, you find out when things are exploding out of control a lot sooner. So figure that out earlier instead of at the last minute.
My issue is that I am having to deploy into a mixed environment. We've got a C# main component on our Windows thing, and then we've got LabVIEW RT and FPGA that I have to update with the same installer.
Okay.
And that's not what I would call supported very well. So
You don't want to just like nest your things?
I don't mind nesting installers, I've done that, but deploying to an RT FPGA target with from a Windows installer is difficult in the first place.
Right.
I think kind of related to that, there's a ton of dependencies typically, and then we don't have a good sandbox environment, or like we don't work well with containers and things like that, where we can test and outside of production, things like that.
All right, dependency understanding and management. Right on the mixed targets.
And also the sandbox part,
I'm sorry, to repeat that.
not having a good way of building a sandbox that you know you can reliably control.
Okay.
Like a container.
Lack of a, yes. Lack of a deployment sandbox.
I have another one, Jeremy. Tooling around automating your builds and like the process part of it.
That's actually a good one. Tooling. All right. I know we're not going to get through all 6 of these topics. John?
I was just going to say, finding a solution that works with your organization's
security requirements, getting.
Nobody wants to think about that, man.
I've been installing IT, won't let me like run the scripts remotely. I have to log into each machine to launch my install script, which
Wow,
for 100 machines.
that's kind of a downer, right? All right.
I wish. I have my own thing.
I also have another one that is updates and issuing updates and how to do that, and how to push those out, and that type of thing.
I think that kind of falls into the distribution channel mechanism.
Okay,
That's part of your plan, is the updates. All right, does anybody have anything that's distinct from what we have up here? I think there's a pretty good list so far. All right, so now who has had at least mixed success at software distribution that is willing to, Fabio is willing to talk about it?
So again, if you figure out early on and you are distributing early on, and you figure out what are the roadblocks for patches and distributing small things and testing. So I think the tips that I would have is start early. Do not build on the same machine that you are developing. I don't care if it's automated or if it's a CI or if it's a CD, just don't build on the same machine that you are developing. That helps you find out problems with it not being committed. It doesn't work on my computer, thing goes away. And then be aware of tools that are out there that work really well with LabVIEW, like BLT. It stands for Build License and Tracking from StudioBots. That one, if you don't want to get into too much about figuring out all the details, it grabs your VI, your top level VI on the splash screen. It deals with updates. It deals with checking. When people start the executable, they check if there are updates available, the downloads it. It makes it look a little bit more professional. So those would be my three.
Yeah, and I like that last tip, because all of us are like, oh, if we want to accomplish this, how would we create something to do it? It's like, well, first, go see what's already there. And that will probably help you a whole lot with the deciding and understanding your distribution mechanism.
I would say also, write a document that's non-expert can follow to deploy. That'll really help you.
All right, document.
Documents such that a non-expert can follow the process and duplicate.
Document the process for a basic user.
Also, I would say, add some kind of an integrity check, make sure that it's been installed at the end.
Okay, I think we're getting into yes, I agree. I'm not gonna write that one because it doesn't address one of the problems, one of the general problems that we had. Tim, and then you.
To address the mixed targets, especially when you're dealing with real-time and standard and FPGA trying to work together, what we've always done is made it do its own distribution. So, because the problem often with the mixed target you brought up is that, you know, what IP address am I pushing to and all these kind of things that are mixed in different environments. But the final deployment, it is already connected together. So what we do is we always had a framework there that it would load up from itself. Its first thing that it does is it checks for an update. So it knows I'm connected to this RTM, connected to this FPGA. So it's like, yeah, just like you're saying, it has a bootstrap in place. So it knows all the things that it's looking for. It knows how to distribute to them, and you just put the files in place. So it'll bootstrap them in the target. A big thing for deploying files.
Aaron.
So I have two. The first is testing from easily resettable environments. Virtual machines that you can easily back up a step to before you tested your first installer, figured out you missed this, and this.
Yeah.
So you go in, add it, and unintentionally remove something, but it's already there because you haven't reset your OS. The second would be separation of installers due to size and complexity. At this point, I pretty much always build 2 installers. One is just the NI drivers, because that's usually anywhere from 500 megabytes to 3 gigabytes. And uploading it for download halfway across the world doesn't work very well when you're wanting to continuously update your EXE on a maybe 1 or 2 day basis, and it's only 20 megabytes.
All right, I do the same thing and recommend it. And VMs is like, that is really taking away a lot of the pain for test and deployments. If I can keep going back to a virgin machine. Derek.
So one thing I've used recently to be very successful with this is NIPM. And it actually does a really good job for distributing that kind of stuff, especially in 2019 with the package installers. Because to Greg's point, you essentially can just build the installer that is the full installer, and then the packages themselves become that iterative thing. And it makes a lot of these annoying things that I've dealt with previously, and IPM solves a pretty big chunk of them for me.
I thought for sure you were going to say GPM.
GPM is reuse libraries and source code, and IPM.
Okay, that's true. Good point. All right, Chris.
So slight word of caution about VMs. If something goes wrong, NI very well may not support you through standard channels because VMs are technically not supported. So be aware of that.
All right. Okay, last one. Mike.
So mine's under tools available a little bit. I learned about this one at a CLA conference. Inno Setup is probably the best tool I've ever learned about ever.
Inno Setup?
Inno Setup.
Yes.
Yeah, sweet.
Like that?
Yeah.
The other one is QT.
And it allowed me to do something on the bottom where you have separate installers. It allows me to make a light installer for some of these big things like LabVIEW Runtime Engine, that all it does is check if it's on the system, and if it's not, then it automatically downloads it and installs it. So I can do that with Inno Setup, and it's pretty awesome.
All right. And what tool did you call out?
QT installer. QT.
QT.
It's similar to
Just the letters.
yeah, and if you're listing tools, list DLT that I listed the first time. It is a LabVIEW tool, so.
Yeah, it's famous. It's classic. All right.
And RAD.
And RAD. All right, y'all know more tools than I do. This is not an area I excel in because most of my customers are on closed networks.
Okay.
Just a dumb question. If I search for BLT, I'm obviously not going to find.
Do BLT for LabVIEW. Do BLT for LabVIEW.com.
Yeah, BLT for LabVIEW.
The company is StudioBot, but if you do BLT for LabVIEW.com, you find it.
Okay, so I need another topic, and it's up to you guys to decide which one we're going to talk about.
Code reviews.
Code reviews. There's a reason that one's red. This is typically like the hardest one of all. All right, so we're talking about reuse libraries, releasing to your reuse libraries, and I have some reasons. Why is this hard? Finding the time for the last, 15%, right? Because inevitably you create something that has great potential for reuse, but you did it because you were working on this project, and you do have to take a step back and think about, okay, this seems reusable as is, right? But a lot of times you want to generalize it just a little bit more, put a little more polish on it, a little more documentation before you release it to your other developers. Okay, what are some other reasons why code reuse is hard?
I said earlier that the business case for one program to support a library, reuse library. The business case for one program to pay for and support a library is difficult when they want someone else to pay for it.
Okay, so,
Take business case for.
and you're talking about, because different people are paying, is that what you mean? Okay,
Well, typically you're working on one project, right? At a time. When you make something a tool or a reuse. But
right, a different customer pay for it.
which project?
And sorry,
Which project pays for that, right? So that's 15%, right? That's really the tough part, and that's a problem probably for integrators as well as for people who work for, their own company or whatever.
what about licensing, right? Like your terms and conditions, not like, like some of my customers, they own everything that I make, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
And that's a big challenge.
Our company, you have to get VP approval to do that.
There's a solution. Next slide. Hold it to VP, I really want it.
Licensing, not just for
Norm.
People don't develop with the mentality to start with, and so you end up with a lot of cancer in the code, default values and stupid things that make it not scalable or more scalable.
Part of our polishing, right?
Yeah, but it's like proactive.
Solid.
I don't have no idea how to document that.
Be proactive.
So,
Having the mentality in mind from the get-go, irrespective of whether you want these or not.
For the thing about cost, I think that when we create reusable code, we do not sell it to the organization, whether it's the customer or your own company, as to what is the money that is actually saving you. So, for example, having Nick mentioned the tools network, that has been a huge investment for us. But in case when we go to a customer and there's no longer the whole thing about, well, we own that architecture you did, right? So VIPM includes the license, they get to accept that it's ours, and we get to show them the return on investment for hiring us. And that can translate to companies and to teams. If you create a project template, record how long it took you to create it, and then the next time it saves you 10, 5 minutes or whatever, you tell your boss, remember that thing that I did on my free time? It actually just saved us this much. If you're able to translate your investment into money and savings for your company, this whole thing about they don't give me time to do stuff will change. But the thing is, we don't let the bosses know, actually. We just give it away, and we don't tell them how much time they save, or money.
Okay, so before we go into solutions, more problems.
A code reuse library is only as good as the directory that helps you find it.
Yes, communication to people who could potentially use discovery, that's it.
Or to tie that in with your last one, distributing updates.
Yes.
So qualifying reuse libraries could be a problem if there's not been any qualification testing on common code. So.
That's an excellent point.
Storing, organizing, labeling, and remembering you have it.
All right. Inventory.
So I have a slightly different take on this. I think the biggest obstacle among my team is just trying to get the team aligned on what are the common strategies and this is reusable code and it's here to make your life easier, but I'm also coming up against some strong personalities and with use this, and this is why. And so for me, it's more of a social obstacle than a
So
technical
lack of a
obstacle.
style guideline, right? That would be
All right.
lack
So-
of a style guideline or lack of style or guideline.
So what I'm hearing is getting people to understand the value of actually reusing. So it's not generating the reuse code as much as, like, I have some, why aren't I want to use it?
And converging, getting, herding cats to converge on common, this is what we want to use, and this is why.
All right. Aaron.
Distribution, not of updates, but distribution of the reuse library and code itself along with whatever code the customer has you actually have given the customer, so that they do have, if they need to, the ability to regenerate the code, everything, and you haven't forgotten to give them pieces.
Just gonna take off updates. Steven.
The design for two problem, where if you always are, you need to have this reuse library, but you always seem to want to design it for the one that's right in front of you. But a good reuse library is useless unless you have at least two examples you know what the flex points need to be. And that requires at some point working on two projects at the same time.
Yeah, so his point, if you couldn't hear, is, kind of what I was alluding to at the very beginning, is when you're doing it and you have, one use case, your whole design skews to that use case. And unless you're doing multiple projects at a time that can use the same thing, or you have been in pain for many projects, then it's hard to design something for reuse that actually is reusable in other applications. It seems like you're always having to tweak it for this application or tweak it for this application. Way over here.
We've had a problem with common code configuration where somebody updated the common code, which broke my code because mine was linked to the latest common code.
Really?
That's the whole package management problem.
Yeah.
So a lot of this is of course just basic package management problem. Several of these things related in that regard. They're all real problems, but they're interrelated on that basis. What I wanted to bring up, and it's somewhat related to Stephen's comment, is I'm not convinced that many of us are all that good at identifying what is actually something that can be or should be, fractured out of a code base to be applicable somewhere else. We tend to think in terms of, this particular set of hardware or this particular set of requirements, and I think there's more reuse in terms of, here's the glue code, here's the operations that we do over and over again that are truly cross application. It's not, here's a reusable, we want a reusable set of features, but I'm not convinced that's what our code reuse is necessarily aligned with, or should be aligned with. So I think to a certain extent, I think we might be misidentifying what should be a candidate for reuse.
I would agree with that. How many times have we built like a class hierarchy and then later you're like, oh crap, I did that wrong, right? I want to do it differently. It's like you never know when, like, is this the final answer? Usually no.
I got one. Nobody's mentioned yet managing versions and dependencies.
That's all, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
John.
The added pain of maintenance of your reused code, where you have to have a separate place where you're maintaining it and developing it versus where it's installed. And when you find a bug in it, having to cast switch to that, make the change, check it in, redistribute it, push it back out, just to be able to use it again, makes it less desirable to even go through the trouble of making it a reused code.
Okay, my box is almost full. Chris.
Kind of along those lines, I think, if you build it, you own it in many cases. So there's not incentive to make things reusable, because when someone else uses it, you have to help them.
All right, I saved the line. Anybody else? I'm spending a little extra time on this one because this one is, we all want it so bad, right? And actually, part of that, I'll get to just a second. Part of, that identification that you're talking about, me talking about, always wanting to restructure your class hierarchy, wanting this reuse so bad is actually really improved the way that I code, right? Because it's like, I want to reuse this. And I've gotten better and better at decoupling things like that, I would not have had that drive if I hadn't been struggling so hard with trying to separate stuff out for reuse.
If you have a hard time finding time for the last 15%, my guess is you might also have a hard time finding time for all the unit tests that are necessary to make it not immediately be messy code.
That's true.
And you really need that for this to all work.
All right. Okay, so who has, I know some of you guys, have reuse libraries that you actually get to reuse? Like, how did you make it happen? Wow. Okay, so I'll remember, Dimitri, you had something way back then I asked you to hold.
Yeah, this is about how you get the extra 15%.
Okay.
So you do your gig on the project and it has a budget, so you do it. And then you got the next project when you can reuse it. And you come to your customer and you say, okay, I can do it from scratch, it will cost you an amount. Or I can refactor the code and improve the code that I already have, and it will cost you 5 man days. So what do you choose? That's your 15%. But you need to be really open to your customer that it is the code that you did on another project, because there might be some issues with, code ownership, etc. They don't want to get into it.
All right, I like that. I like that strategy.
So when you work with customers that you're doing work for hire, and it says that everything that you do is owned by them, that's where VIPM actually just does a really good job, because you can add a license to it. So when you're giving their code and you're distributing the source code, you give them the source code and then the list of all the dependencies. And those dependencies might include packages that you build that you identify as that they can be used in other projects. And then they have to click on the license. When I get customers that push back on that, and they're like, no, I don't want that, I want you to create everything from scratch. That's when I go back to line 1 and I tell them, the number of hours that I spent on that tool is this many. I am willing to make it from scratch. Are you willing to pay for it?
Yeah.
And it normally goes away.
I like that idea, because part of the challenge is communicating this clearly is like our IP. This part of the code, because when they start digging into BIs, it all looks the same to them, right?
But they have, in order to install their computer, they have to accept on the license when they are installing the dependencies.
Yes. So using packages makes a really clear boundary. So I like that idea a lot. Okay, there were like 10 hands. Go ahead.
Okay, for the question about cleanly using reuse code as opposed to project code and how to do a clean job of it, we have a source code control where we have externals for the reuse library, and we can on a project basis we can say what version of that specific part that we want to reuse or we want to use in our project. So we identify it. That way, if that updates, it doesn't necessarily break our, because we can lock it. So we have a very clear delineation of project code versus reuse or external code.
So to solve the problem of discovery, you just need to stick around for the next discussion.
All right, I'm not gonna write that one down. We'll give it away.
Jeremy?
Michael, yes.
Regarding the kind of people problem with this, a lot of times the people who are most eager to share their code, this is really specific to within a company. People most eager to share the code, write the worst code.
Yeah, that's not specific.
And the people who could benefit from it most, most are the ones who are like control freaks, and either their ego or their fear gets in the way of them accepting other people's code. So a lot of it does come down to testability. And then on another side note, we have multiple groups within the company, some using Git, some using SVN. You can mirror both directions, and that helped us.
All right, so I'm waiting for Jeremy.
Yeah,
So the one other remark I wanted to make is, another thing that we make that goes really well with the licensing area is we treat our reusable code as a customer project. We treat developer as a customer. So when we are evaluating at the month basis, right, what's the balance? What are the customers that we have not given any love to? Developer should not be on that list. So we are investing in our own tools. So we have, for each one of our reusable tools, we have a repo, we have a bug tracking, we have budget tracking, and we keep that in line. So
yeah, that's actually an excellent point. You should have issue tracking, bug tracking, budget for your internal investment. So otherwise, you just like hand it to the intern and hope for the best. Right?
As far as separating reuse, as far as like if my reuse code isn't reusable because I didn't plan on it being reuse code, this sounds snobbish and maybe it's obvious, but I just pretend everything's going to be reuse code when I'm writing it. I assume it's reuse, and if I don't reuse it, then it's still probably better code than what it would have been otherwise.
All right, so there's some people that agree with you, and there's some people that won't. It's the whole like development philosophy, right? You go for like quick and hope that your overall cost later is lower because you didn't spend a bunch of time on it, and then maybe like you change jobs and it's somebody else's problem.
I feel like the more you use that though, the more efficient you become and the less that argument will fly.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. There's, when you first started, it took forever to like straighten all the wires, right? But eventually you just start doing it as you go, and it takes no time at all. So I accept that argument. John?
I generally take any code that I can say is not project specific, and I just put it in the reuse folder as a potential candidate for reuse. So, as long as it doesn't have anything to do with the business logic of the thing I'm building, it probably could be reused somewhere. And then I'll later go through and clean that up a little bit and try to narrow that down. But I think by dumping all of the possible candidates into the reuse repository, you have something to work with later.
Right. Okay, I like that too. So next time you need your TCP messaging thing, you're like, well, I've done it for 3 projects. Let me just grab from and just use that as a starting place.
Yeah.
Potential reuse.
Well, I'm really gratified that I'm hearing a lot of the same stuff that we're doing from people here, especially.
So you can leave then.
But yeah,
you're done.
But we're big on team process. We have a whole established flowchart for turning something into reuse. So like, if it's identified as reuse, we kind of do a trial balloon on a couple other projects to make sure that, yeah, you can take it from one project to another. Then it becomes a candidate, it gets a step, and I'm talking about things that are already up there. It gets assigned a project number at that point, and then it's still just a candidate. And then to make it into reuse, you have to make a unit test, you have to have somebody else run that unit test, and then it gets assigned a product number that we can sell. And then basically we're like, hey, you want this reuse object? It's this price. And just like was stated before, if you want us to recreate it from scratch, it'll be 10 times as much. So you gain the benefit or you gain the IP, which do you want?
All right. Ethan?
Use semantic versioning. You know those numbers like 2.1.3, those numbers mean specific things. They make this really easy, and this is what they're designed for. Along with that, you can just make a little list. Use a change log, so when you go to reuse the code or it changes, you know what changed, you know whether you should use it or not. And have a README file, so you know what's in the reuse code.
So like, be responsible.
But the thing is, like, these things to be responsible are not 15% more.
Yes.
These things that Ethan are talking about make a huge difference. Like, semantic versioning is 3 numbers to learn. Like, it's not that complicated. And they make a huge difference in doing all this stuff, and it's literally like 15 minutes of extra work. It's not 15% extra work.
Yeah.
But then they save you mega headaches in the future.
50% the very first time you ever build a package.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's going back to what Tim said, put that as part of your process so it doesn't fall through the cracks, and it won't take that long.
Yeah.
I have one thing to add. So looking for reuse code before you implement something, sometimes this is sort of on the receiving end, but ask your team members, hey, have you solved this problem? And then oftentimes you'll end up with some reusable code that they wrote or they can help you out.
So there's a lot of stuff in here, and it's not all these are even addressing the same problem. We have a bunch of problems in this box. I have code, how can I make it reusable? And then, different processes, different ideas to prove that. But there's all sorts of different kinds of code and kinds of ways to reuse it. Are you talking about source libraries? Are you talking about plugin modules? Are you talking about IDE tools and utilities? Are you talking about artifacts and executables that people will run? And the solution depends on your domain. So realize what your problem is and focus on that subset of that problem. All of these are not the same problem, and using a method that's great for one on another will hurt.
Do you have advice on how to make these things distinct and which things are good for what?
I have about an hour's worth, and I'll be presenting this afternoon on that.
All right. That's not going to fit in this box. Okay, anything else before we move to the next topic? Oh, well, we made that maybe all our topics.
As I'm watching these lists of what we're going to succeed come together, I think it's actually kind of related. It's structurally related to what I was saying about reuse code in general. I think you put up what are our pain points, what are the things we want to do that are really hard to do, and I'm looking at what we're putting up for the answers here, and what's striking me is I think you might have the orthogonality of the question wrong, because I'm seeing a lot of stuff here that's about, package, some of it's about design, some of it's about package management, a lot about package management, which is something I've talked about before, and how much of this goes to the distribution problem. How much of that is also package management? How much of package management goes into CI and CD? And I think we may have some of these underlying things that we're supposed to be paying attention to that we don't pay attention to because we're looking at our pain points instead.
Yes, I can see that. It's really easy to get into the details, just like any kind of evaluation of your process. All right, well, I believe we are out of time. So my my hope is here that I'm gonna put this up, and I hope it will on the forums. I hope y'all will continue the discussion there for the different topics. I'm gonna try to do an analysis and see if there's some general conclusions we can draw from this based on what we gathered here today. And thank you very much for contributing. As I said, all summit. This will be on the LabVIEW wiki, thanks to our already active community people. All right, if you have any questions, you can email me. This is my personal address, and feel free to email me there, and we can talk more. Any final questions? All right, thanks.